Hello, welcome. This is Teresa Lyons, and I wanted to welcome to the webcast titled Using iPads to Promote Access and Learning for Students with Autism Spectrum Disorders. Can you remember a time before the iPad even existed? It's really hard in this day and age to really even think about iPads before we had them in our pockets, before our parents had them, before kids were using them. But it's actually a new, novel piece of technology that has only been out for a few years. It really is getting harder and harder to remember a world where the iPad didn't exist. If you think about the iPad and the growth of the iPad over time, we've moved from the iPad Classic to the Nano, to the Shuffle, to the iPod Touch, then out came the iPhone, then the iPad and the iPad Mini. We've gone through multiple generations of the iPad. Before the iPad existed, Microsoft and various and IBM and the ThinkPad and Lenovo all came out with a variety of the small devices that were portable, but they were huge. They were plastic, they were heavy, they were steel encased, and they really were not accessible to the everyday consumer. They were very, very costly. Parents could not buy them and use them in the home. You couldn't stick it in your purse, you couldn't stick it in your bag. It was really built for the business community, but not for the everyday consumer. And this is where the iPad has been a revolution in technology, and it's become a revolution in education. If you look at this graphic, you can kind of see at the upper top that we had these ThinkPads and these steel encased things, but if you look at the iPad, it was small, it was portable, it was thin, it had a camera built into it. And if you think about after the iPad is developed, everybody is producing a tablet computer now. Every company out there is creating something that is accessible, that can be used in classrooms. But today we're going to be talking about the iPad in particular, because that seems to be the technology that is most being used in classrooms, that teachers are looking for ways to use in flexible and instructional ways. And so let's kind of think about what the world looked like before the iPad, and I'm going to show you what the world looks like now.
In a world where a little old lady whispering hush would never be heard, comes a book for our time.
In the bright, buzzing room, there was an iPad, and a kid playing Doom, and a screensaver of a bird launching over the moon. And there were 3 little nooks with 10,000 books, and a huge LCD Wi-Fi HD TV, with Bose 5.1, 6 remotes, and 3D. And a BlackBerry ringing with Eminem singing,
yo, yo.
And a new Facebook friend, and texts with no end, and a viral clip of a cat doing flips, and the bings, bongs, and beeps of emails and tweets, and a fed-up old woman who was trying to sleep. Good night, iPad. Good night, Doom. Good night, bird launching over the moon. Good night, nooks and digital books. Good night, Eminem.
Yo.
Good night, Facebook friend. Good night, LOLs. Good night, MP3s. Good night, LCD, Wi-Fi, HD TV. Good night, remotes and Netflix streams. Androids, apps, and glowing screens. Good night, plugs and power lights that guide us to pee in the darkness of night. Good night, buzzing. Good night, beeps. Good night, everybody who should be asleep. Good night, pop stars.
Yo.
Good night, MacBook Air. Good night, gadgets everywhere.
As an adult who has nieces and nephews, I can't even remember a world where I don't go to my brothers and sisters and my parents' home and the homes of my cousins and nephews and aunts and uncles, and don't see people with technology. Technology has so inundated our world that it's even hard to imagine a time where someone wasn't using an iPhone to text, using an iPad to read a book, using an iPhone to do FaceTime and talk to someone, to use an iPad to generate written text. I use my iPad and my iPhone to do to-do lists. I mean, I don't even create a shopping list anymore. I use Grocery IQ on my iPhone, and I type in apps, and I type in my shopping list, and I scan the back of a barcode on something in my shelf. It inundates our everyday world, and this video of Goodnight iPad shows what the world is like for all of us, those with and without disabilities. And in our classrooms, we really need to shift our thinking from a world of just textbooks and crayons and papers to a world of technology. If we want our students to really access the world as we know it, a world where we have access to information at the light of speed, we really need to think about technology and iPads as a tool of learning and living. And in order to do that, we've got to really think about planning to use the iPad in a way that's instructional and not just for reinforcement, not just for fun, but it has so many applicable uses. So I'm going to jump into a little bit of history about the iPad because I told you that we're digital natives, that this is a part of our world. But I asked a colleague yesterday when she thought the iPad was first released, and she told me 1990. And I kind of laughed, because in our minds, that's what we're thinking. We think this piece of technology has been a part of our world for as long as we can remember. And I didn't start teaching until 1996. And it wasn't around in 1996. So I know 1990 was not an accurate answer. But the first iPod Classic was only released in November of 2001. This technology is only 12 years old. And the iPad Classic was just a music device. So you no longer had to walk around with these big boom boxes sitting on your shoulder. I'm from New York, so big boom boxes on the shoulder was normal. But you had this little tiny device that you could stick in your pocket and put a headphone on, and you had now this personal music experience rather than the whole world hearing it. So it's only 12 years ago were we introduced to this small piece of technology. In September of 2007, the iPod Touch was released. So we moved from this portable music device to now this little device that I can use video on, that I can have simple apps on. So now we're opening up the world even more to students with disabilities and to the public in general. So it's moved from a music device to a device that really is incorporated into our lives. The iTunes App Stores was only open in July of 2008. So only 5 years ago were we actually developing applications that made our lives easier, that made access to books and lists and communication apps and apps for writing and reading became more accessible in 2008. The first iPad was only released on April 3rd of 2010. The iPad is only 3 years old. It's not very long ago. Do you remember who was president then? It's the same president now, Obama. 2010, not very old. And that year, over 15 million were sold. By 2012, over 200 million were sold. So it's really gone from, it's really fully developed in a short period of time. And that is the excitement about technology, and also the kind of scary part about technology is that it's changing so quickly that it's hard for us to keep up with. And there are thousands upon hundreds of thousands of apps out there. And as educators, it's hard to navigate that. So we struggle with which app to use, when to use it, how to use it. And what I'm finding as an educator is if we kind of pare down what's out there and really find several good apps that can be used in our classroom, we open up the world to all of our students. But once again, our iHistory is it's not been very long. Just some fun facts. Angry Birds is the most popular app on the iPad according to the Ask Your Target Market. And I know working with kids with autism, I'm very often asked, Angry Birds, I want to do Angry Birds. And I find in classrooms that students are using Angry Birds a lot. But what I often see is students are not using their iPads for reading, writing, communicating, making lists, doing FaceTime, Skyping, writing text messages to others. So while Angry Bird is great, we do want to build leisure within our skills. We've got to take this great piece of technology and teach our students how to use it for living. The average user spends 16 to 30 hours a week on their iPads. That is huge. That's me. That is you. That's us who don't have disabilities. I wonder, and I don't have the research on this, but I wonder how many hours a week the individual with a disability spends using an iPad. I bet you it's probably 1 to 2 hours, if that. That might be even stretching the amount. But we use it 16 to 30 hours a week. And one thing we know about the more time you spend with something, the more fluent you become using it. And our students with disabilities need to become fluent users of the technology that all of us use. In order to be a part of the work community, a part of their home community, part of their environment, to just really access the world as a whole, they need to be spending as much time using these applications to kind of build that ongoing fluency. There's a term out there now that's called digital natives. If you kind of Google and look at it, you'll find many research articles and many professors that are really talking about this terminology. And this is my nephews and my nieces. Not called my nephew. My nephew's 14, but think about my new nephew who's only 3 years old. He's a digital native. As soon as I handed him an iPad, he knew what to do with it. I didn't have to teach him how to scroll it. I didn't have to teach how to move around with it. He knew you touched it and it did something. Technology is a part of our everyday life for our young children. They connect with others, they write messages, they read books, they view videos, they view online content, they search online, they play, they talk to others long distance, they Skype, they use FaceTime, they learn, which is really the biggest part of what we want for our kids. I laugh when I come home after a long trip and sitting on my front porch is usually a phone book, and I get a new phone book about every 2 months. And I think, what a waste of paper, because I don't use a phone book anymore. I go to whitepages.com because I can access anybody's phone number. I can even find out how old they are. I can find their whole history of how many locations they lived in the past. Our world is shifting, and the tools that we've used in the past are not the tools of our digital natives. And in order to become a digital native, you've got to spend time using the technology in a way that connects you with all these things I put up here on this PowerPoint. Writing messages, reading, viewing videos, searching online, playing, talking to others, in order for us to be using it as an instructional tool. So I want to start with some basic assumptions about technology. And this applies to anyone and everyone. And we really need to kind of have this in the back of our mind for students with autism and students with disabilities. The one thing we know about teaching is no one instructional strategy is effective for all. All students learn differently. All students have different strengths. Integrating technology into instruction can remove the barriers that may impede student success, and that we must plan for the needs of the broadest possible range of users from the beginning. In our instruction, we really need to keep these basic assumptions in mind. I find too often when I go into classroom, it is a lecture-based classroom, even for students with disabilities. The problem with that approach is that we are not providing access and learning for all the students in our classroom. We have students that don't have a means to communicate. We have students without a means to write. We have students without a means to read. We have students that don't have a means to let the world know that they are understanding, that they have something to say. When we embrace this basic assumption, we create an educational, instructional environment where there are tools for everyone to access. That's the nice thing about the iPad. With the wealth of apps that are available on the iPad, I can turn my iPad into a communication device, and you'll get to see that here in a few minutes. I can turn my iPad into a writing device with scaffolded supports, so my student with autism can independently write. I can use an app to provide the scaffolds so my student with autism who may not be vocal can be vocal using a device that allows them to read information as part of a book. I can put apps on there where they can show that they understand literacy and writing and math. So by setting up the iPads in our classrooms, we do what's kind of that terminology out there, that universal design for learning. We open the environment as a whole so all students can participate in the curriculum and access the information. And technology is one of the best ways to remove barriers. When you put an iPad or an iPhone or any tablet computer in front of any kid with a disability, it's kind of like the disability disappears. They're a kid. They're laughing. They're engaging. They're trying to get at that device. Put a book in front of a kid. Do you see a kid touching it, pointing to it, turning the pages? Not as much. But when I put that device in front of the kids, it's like the world has opened up. They want to touch it. And so within our classrooms, we really need to be using technology in ways that our kids will be motivated and engaged. And that's the power of the iPad. So within our educational environments, our classrooms have so much technology, which is absolutely wonderful, and it's absolutely wonderful for students with disabilities. But think about your classroom. If you've been teaching 20 years, as many of us who may be watching this broadcast, you can remember back to a day where you just had a blackboard. If you had a magnetic board, you were lucky. You might be able to put magnetic letters on the board, but you pretty much had a chalkboard where you wrote with chalk. And then, when I was starting to teach, I had the dry erase board where I can actually use dry erase markers and I can put magnetic letters on it. That was probably the technology that I was using every day in my classroom. Then we came out with can't think of the name of it, but the Mac computers drawing a blank on the name of it. But you know, these computers, these little IBM computers, and I could put a touch screen on it. So now I had some points of accessibility. But really, when you look at our classrooms now, and I go in, I think it's absolutely wonderful, and I wish I had it back when I was in the classroom, is smartboards and tablets and iPads and iTouches and computers and touch screens and adaptive writing pencils and adaptive utensils for eating. Our worlds are so enriched with technology. The thing that I see often, though, is that we're not using and integrating technology in a way that it's integrated into our instruction. And that's really what I'm going to show you in multiple videos, is how we've taken two classrooms that are using a 4-block literacy method and who are using guided reading and working with words, and we're using the traditional tools we use in classrooms, which is, you know, paper and pencil and books and glue and scissors, and how we can bring iPad technology and apps to those lessons to really open up the world for children who were not able to access the lesson in traditional ways. But these are all really great tools that just open up the world for everybody. The instructional tools that are in our classroom, I'm just going to go to just a little bit of kind of legal stuff related to technology. The technology tools we have every day in our classroom, the smart boards, the computers, are not things that we have to write into children's IEPs, because those are things everybody needs. The shift comes when our students need these tools to access learning. If I have a student who must have an iPad to engage with writing, I don't write the iPad into the IEP, but I write what the iPad will do for the student to access learning. So I might write into an IEP that the student will have a portable technology with touch screen input and a writing program that provides scaffolded support. I just told you the name of, without saying the name, a program that I'm going to show you in a little bit called Clicker Sentences that provides that scaffolded support. But just so, if you're not aware of what assistive technology is, this is the basic definition. An assistive technology device is any item, piece of equipment, or product system, whether you acquire it commercially, you modify it, or customize it, that is used to increase, maintain, or improve functional capabilities of individuals with disabilities. There's a huge definition to say any tool that allows a student with disability to have access to learning, and they need it to access learning. It is assistive technology. So it can be as simple as a weighted pencil. It could be simple as a pencil grip, or it could be something as complex as an iPad with a communication application on it. If the student needs that to access learning, it needs to be added to the IEP, and it needs to be included in the child's program. So thinking about assistive technology and educational technology, what we know is all students benefit from the technology available in the school. Our students with disabilities and our students with autism need additional supports and tools to access learning. They benefit from the smartboard, they benefit from the tablet computer, but if in my classroom they need a communication device to talk, they need a communication device to talk in the library. They need that same device in the cafeteria. They need that same device at home. They need that same device on the playground. They need that same device in PE. Therefore, it shifts over to assistive technology. And we need to be thinking about these devices for our kids, because the only way they're going to be accessing the world, to be living and learning as everybody else is, they need these tools. So let's talk about technology, and I've talked about this a little bit, but technology can help our students with writing, reading, communication, learning, access, activities of daily living, and positive behavior supports. The technology is moving so fast that now iPads, many apps are building in switch accessibility into the iPad. So I can hook up a switch and I can give it to a child who might have significant motor disabilities, but can now access the iPad using two-switch scanning or single-switch scanning. And so the iPad, which was never meant for the disability community, it was meant for the everyday consumer, is now becoming a device that is so usable and so accessible for the community at large. And it's a really exciting time to see with the development of the tools for the iPad are. So technology in the classroom. We know it can help improve communication skills, and I'm going to show you a video with that. It can increase social interaction. There's nothing greater than giving a child with a disability an iPad, and the coolest thing happens. The peers come running around. So this child that might not be able to communicate and have a means to interact with the lesson now has 3 or 4 kids that are saying, touch it, let me see it, let me point to it, hey, you point to this. And so we kind of create this nice natural community of learning with our classrooms by making these technologies available. It increases attention to learning activities. It expands motivators. It increases organizational skills. It increases independence and increases access to learning activities. All right, so now let's move into talking about instruction and what you need to do. And, you know, I'm asked over and over, you know, tell me about iPads and tell me about apps to use and tell me what I should be doing with my classroom. And what I want to tell you is the iPad is not any different from any other piece of technology we use in instruction. We need to plan for it. The iPad is not a magic box that will just instruct the students because they are given access to it. We should be planning iPads as if we're planning a textbook, as if we're planning what worksheet to do, as if we're planning what book to read. It should be a tool that we're thinking about strategically within our lessons. One of the things that is kind of my soapbox in going into classrooms is our students will use an iPad as a toy and as a fun thing if we don't give them a specific task to accomplish with it. It kills me when I go into classrooms and I see iPads only being used as an earned reinforcer, because the iPad is something that can be used in so many ways across the classroom. And one of the things I've been working with teachers on is instead of having children work for the iPad, have them work for an app. So they don't just get the iPad and kind of scroll and just randomly hit and come in and out of programs, but they earn access to Angry Bird for 3 minutes, or they earn access to a writing app for a certain amount of time, or they earn access to a coloring app for a certain amount of time as a reinforcer. But instructionally, I'm allowing them to use it for a longer period of times as long as they stay within the program. And I'm going to show you a tool here in a little bit that has really helped shape education and the use of the iPad, and that we can now keep our students in the apps rather than getting out of the apps and going to the things they want to. But in order to use the iPad in instruction, I need to decide what it is I want my student to do and what I want them to accomplish with the task. If I don't know what I want them to do, they're not going to know, and it really kind of puts a barrier in instruction. We need to see the tablet as an interactive tool. One of the biggest things I see with assistive technology or any technology for students with disabilities, it becomes the student's tool, which we want it to be. But we want that tool to be used by everyone. Students need to see me using it. They need to see me modeling it and holding it up as part of my lesson and touching it and modeling how to write and modeling how to read and modeling very different things, and all the students engaging with it. Our students with disabilities need to see lots of models and students navigating the device. And even though the device may become a communication tool for one student, the student sitting next to them can show them what it looks like and interact with it. Our students need to be engaged and on task when using it, whether they do it individually or with a group. So I talked about this first point, that we need to really plan the iPad just as we do any other technology and instructional materials. When I go in with a lesson, I know what tools I have in place. When you go and you're observed by your principal, you know on your checklist is that question that says the teacher has all the materials ready for instruction. You need to think about the iPad for that. You shouldn't be in the middle of a lesson then running and getting your iPad. The iPad should be there just like your pencils are and your crayons and your glue sticks and your scissors. It should be there ready to be pulled out and used as a part of instruction. And then we need to recognize that technology supports everyday instruction. It does not replace it. Too often I see with technology, we hand the iPad or we hand the computer off to a student and they go off and do it on their own. But we should be modeling it. We should be asking the student to do certain things and perform certain tasks and really integrating it in part of our instruction. There is computer-based instruction. There are ways that our students interact with technology independently. But what we know from learning is if we don't teach it, they won't use it in a way that's appropriate. So don't think about technology replacing you as an educator. It should only be enhancing those things that we do every day in our classroom. So I want to share with you a tool that I picked up at a conference I went to recently, which is the Thematic Literacy Planner, and it was developed by the Loudoun County Public Schools Assistive Technology team. I think we all know how to develop lesson plans and kind of write those plans that we hand into our principals. But this is a simple literacy planner that can be done for activities over a week or a month or several weeks. But it's a very simple form that I can add. I can put in my anchor book. I can write in some of the words and concepts and vocabulary that I'm going to use. And it's broken down into different domains of literacy, citizenship, communication, math, science, skilled movement, social studies, and other. So it forces me to think about the book I'm using and how it integrates into my instruction as a whole, which that is something we do as far as lesson planning. What I've liked that they've built into it is the last 3 parts, which is communication opportunities embedded in activities. I don't think as educators we spend enough time thinking about the words that our children need to say as they're a part of instruction. We don't think about the questions I'm going to ask and the things my student needs to say. And we need to really be thinking about those in advance, because that's going to direct us to the iPad and the communication apps that need to be on our device. It also is going to direct us towards the writing supports that our students need. Can they write with a pencil? Do they need a word bank? Do they need particular software? Do they need a keyboard? Do they need alphabet? The nice thing about all these things, other than a pencil, the word bank, software, keyboard, and alphabet, there are apps that will have those right on the iPad. The other thing is any other technology supports that you're going to use. So the nice thing about this document is that you can really put everything on here and strategically plan how you're going to use the iPad and what apps. And if you're like many of the school systems I've worked with, you really need to plan in advance what apps you're going to be using instructionally. Because I know with my iPad, I can just go download something pretty quickly because it's my personal device. But in schools, most of us are in environments where we have to hand our iPad off to someone else, and the school has to purchase it and download those apps. And even if they're free, we've got to hand them off to somebody else. So we really need to be actively planning 3, 4, 5 weeks ahead of time so that we get the right tools on our device. And this kind of thematic planner will help us with that. All right, so now let me show you some videos on different ways of using the iPad. I learned about this guided access not long ago, and it's one of the best things I've learned, and I think one of the best things in education. The new iOS 6, which is on the iPhone and iPad, has an accessibility feature built in it called guided access. In the past, when I would give an iPad to a student, and even though I'm there supporting the student using the iPad, the first thing they go for, even if I'm giving them a communication device and that device is going to allow them to ask for a cookie when they're hungry, sometimes that cookie is not as motivating as hitting the home key and going to Angry Birds. And so even though they want to communicate about the cookie, they are getting out of that program because Angry Birds is so much more exciting than the cookie. But there's a way to lock our kids into an app, which is really helping the educational environment, where in classrooms, when you have an iPad cart and you have 20 iPads, it is hard as a teacher to monitor whether every student is on the same thing. With the guided access, I can now lock a student into an app. They can't hit the home key, they can't turn the device off, they can't get anywhere, which really keeps them into the program. And I know a classroom of 20 kids, everybody's interacting with the iPad as I intended. All right, so I'm going to show you a video that was developed by Jonathan Wiley, and it is available on YouTube.
To access guided access on the iPad, you need to go into the settings menu. So once you're in the settings menu, make sure you're in the General tab, and then scroll down to the second last option on the screen here that says Accessibility. Once you hit the accessibility, you'll see a lot of the normal options that you're used to in iOS 5, but because we're in iOS 6 now, under the Learning tab, you can see guided access is off, so we'll tap that and we will turn it on. Got an option here to set a passcode. If I was working one-to-one with a student, I might not need that passcode because I would be there to supervise and see their actions. But in a classroom situation, you might want to set that passcode with larger groups that are harder to manage individually. So I'm going to tap Set Passcode. I'll just do 1, 2, 3, 4. It prompts me to re-enter my password, 1, 2, 3, 4. And now guided access is available for me in any app that I want to use it in. So I'm going to come out of here and I'm going to go into Safari. Here I am on a web page in Safari. And what I want to do is just give students access to this web page. I don't want them to navigate off this page. I don't want them to go searching the internet for other things. I only want them to be using this website. So I'm going to lock it down a little bit with guided access. So I'll triple click the home button and you can see it shrinks away there and opens up my guided access options. In the bottom left-hand corner, it says the hardware buttons are always off. So once I click Start in that top right-hand corner, it means that the home button will not function the way it normally does. Students can press it, nothing will happen. Touch, in the middle at the options at the bottom there, if I turn the touch off, it means they will not be able to interact with any of the page at all. So you can see it's all grayed out there on the screen. Nothing that resembles a touch will have any consequence on this web page right now. So I'll leave it on right now. That's going to be a little impractical. I don't want to lock down the whole website, just keep it on this one page. So what I can do is I can draw a circle around this top half here. So I'm going to say all the way around the top there, I'm going to include the navigation bar, I'm going to include all my bookmark bar, include the search bar. So really there's no option for the student now to get off this website. In the bottom right hand corner, the last option there is motion, and that includes whether you want the device to be able to turn from portrait to landscape. It's a bit like a lock rotation option, but it gives you the option to make sure that that is on and cannot be turned off. So set the options the way you want them, circle the areas on the screen that you do not want the students to interact with, and once you're done, hit Start in the top right hand corner. So it says guided access has started, and you can see at the top those top areas that I drew the circle around is all hashed out, and nothing that I tap up there now has any access on the screen. So how do I turn it off? Well, I just do my triple click home button again, 1, 2, 3, and it asks me for the passcode. So I'll put my passcode in, and there I get the option in the top left hand corner to click end. Once I click end, it says guided access has ended.
So that's a simple video, and you can find that video on YouTube, and there are many videos on YouTube that show you how to set up guided access. And it really is that simple, going into settings and set up the feature. I would suggest setting a passcode. Don't ever put the passcode in front of the students, because I find they will remember the passcode and you've kind of thrown your guided access out the window. But the nice thing about the guided access is when a student starts clicking on the home key, on the home button, that it will pop up the password. And if they put in the wrong password, it will lock them into the program for 10 seconds. So every time they hit that home key, they're given 10 more seconds that they can't actually access the password. So they stay within the program. I've got another video that shows one of the students with autism in one of the classrooms actually trying to get out. He really wanted to use Angry Birds, and we were doing an activity with a program called POG that I'm going to show you here in a little bit. But it kind of shows you how he's not able to exit the program.
This is more engaging than the pictures and the things that we normally use.
And then, as much as possible, support him on his elbow to kind of move in that direction, because you see, as soon as he got there, his finger came out, which is really what you want him to be doing.
Yeah.
See, he's got the point. So that's what I'm saying. Support him at the elbow. Getting out wasn't working for him. Really kind of kept him in the program, and over multiple opportunities he will find that it doesn't work and that he needs to stay within the program. And this is a child that loves the iPad but prefers to use it as a reinforcer to access things that he wants to engage in. So that's a really simple way of keeping out students actually in the application as we're working with them. All right, so I'm going to go through a few apps that I've used with these two classrooms, that I've used with other students that really I find very good. The first one is really cute and fun. It's a little green alien called POG. And I find it's really hard to find apps out there of individuals doing actions. And so if I really want to work with kids on what is somebody doing and what did they do or what happened, it's really hard finding good applications out there with just has enough vocabulary around actions. But this is a little alien who performs 36 different actions. You can either choose a picture or you can actually spell out. So it asks you, what do you want POG to do? And you could type out hop, and POG will start hopping. Here's another app that I'm going to actually show you in video called Clicker Sentences. This is a fantastic app. Many of us use Clicker in our classrooms on our computers. Clicker is a scaffolded writing program. It provides a word bank at the bottom of the screen and then a word processor at the top. Students can just click a word and it shows up in the word processor. The nice thing is I can generate a sentence. I can put the words in the app, and the child can have only the words that they need to produce the sentence. I can also do something called forced choice, where it puts the sentence in order, and it will only highlight word by word, so they actually have to, you'll see it in the video, where they can't just say can I, they have to hit I can, and each word highlights as it needs to be clicked. The nice thing about Clicker Sentences is it's not just a writing program, it actually can be used to scaffold reading. What I can do is I can put a photo in of a page in a book, and I can just use a camera to take a photo, or I can use my iPad to take a photo, put it into the app, and then I can write out a sentence. And the student can actually read the sentence by clicking word by word. So if they're not able to read, they don't have vocal speech, finding all the language on the device and generating every single word might be cumbersome for a student, but having it right there in Clicker Sentences allows them to actively engage as the book's being read. And you'll get to see a sample of that. Clicker app also has a program called Clicker Documents, and I don't have video of this, but you can go to YouTube and find many videos. This is the next step up from Clicker Sentences. This is for a student who has a larger vocabulary but needs some word support. So you can generate word banks. It also has word prediction. So if I start typing in the word guess and I start typing GU, all words that start with GU are going to pop up, like guts and guess and a variety of things. The choosing can choose the word, and it will pop up in the word processor. Both the programs Clicker Sentences and Clicker Documents have speech-to-text support. So the child can click on a word before they choose it, and it will read it to them so they know whether they're choosing the right word. Another program I'm going to show you embedded into instruction is a communication app called LAMP Words for Life. The thing about the LAMP app is it's a very robust communication program that uses a kind of a therapeutic approach that really focuses on a consistent motor plan for every word on the device. There are many devices out there, when you hit a cell, it speaks an entire sentence for you, so it's not generative language. And what we know about communication is it's generative. You know, I might be starting the sentence as I want, and I'm thinking cookie, and then I see the word chip, and I'll switch to chip. But if the device is already programmed for me, I'm always saying I want cookie, and I don't get to switch up, and I don't get to generate. That's what's nice about this program, is there's more than 5,000 words built into the program already, using the common words we use in everyday life so our students can access language. And then the last app I'm going to show you is magnetic letters, and there's many apps out there that look like this, and it's just a magnetic board, just like a classroom magnetic board or a refrigerator, where students can move letters around and make words. Okay, so now I want to talk about two classrooms where I introduced these apps to the students. And these are classrooms with students with multiple disabilities. So that you'll see students with autism, you'll see students with motor impairments. The thing I want you to know is iPads are for anybody. I could have showed you lots of video of just students with autism, but the reality is our classrooms are classrooms for students with multiple disabilities, and the access that a student with motor impairment needs is some of the same access features that a student with autism needs. So there are a variety of students that you're going to see in these classrooms. So this is an elementary class that is from kindergarten to 4th grade. They are using the 4-block literacy method, which looks at guided reading, self-selected reading, writing, and working with words. You're going to see two parts. You're going to see guided reading, and you're going to see some writing activities. They're using the leveled reader I Can from the Reading A to Z website. The focus is on some basic sight words and some action verbs like I can jump, I can run, I can roll. They've already read this book for several days, and they've actually performed actions. So the students have gotten up and rolled on the floor and jumped and spun around to show that they can do the actions. And they're watching, and you'll actually see them watching some video of peers engaging in actions. But it's been very heavily, the instruction's been very heavily on using vocal speech to access the book. So the students there that are on the fringe that can't vocally speak really are not engaging at the fullest. And so you'll see as we add in the technology how all the students are able to engage with the lesson. So the 3 apps that I use in this classroom, and the 2 that you'll see in the video, are Clicker Sentences and POG. All right, so I'm going to show you some of the students using Clicker Sentences for writing. Okay. The teacher, Miss Day, start with some video of her own children doing certain actions, and the students would watch the video, then they would have to say what the child was doing.
What's he doing? He's reading a book.
Can you tell me a sentence? I can read. I
Count.
I
Can.
can
Sit.
can
Can.
read.
Read.
Period.
I will tell
Good
you,
job.
the child that is most...
Sound on that thing.
It won't go loud. As loud as it'll go. I had it full force when I was recording. Hopefully my smart one will be. Can you count is?
All right, can you count?
I'm gonna make
Say,
sure
say
they've
I
not
can
turned
count.
it down, but I don't think they have.
Type out I can count. I,
What else? Hit the right button.
look, watch. I
I
can.
can.
What's count?
Yeah. I mean, that's as loud as I can get.
Count.
Look here, buddy.
Period.
I can count.
I can count. Say 1. All right.
Stand.
Oh, you're great. I'm loving it. I definitely
Ethan,
want
ready? Watch. Ethan, look. I'm gonna sit.
Miss Teresa.
I can sit. Can you sit? There you go, Andrew. So what you're seeing is the students are watching videos and then using the iPad to generate sentences related to that. And over time, these students are becoming proficient with using the app. I'm providing that scaffolded support. The students were still unsure of the words, so I was there kind of prompting them and providing them the support. And what we did with this lesson, and what you don't see is the video I didn't show, is me rolling on the floor, skipping and jumping and having fun. But you know, you want to make the lessons interactive. Once again, remember, the technology is supporting your instruction. If I'm reading a book about I can, we're doing actions. We're not just sitting at the table. The students are generating sentences, and then we're getting them up and spinning and jumping. So if they say they can read, they're going to show me they can read. If they can say I can skip, we're going to get up and skip together. So it becomes integrated part of my lesson. It does not become the lesson as a whole. So I'm going to show you some video now of the students interacting with Pog the alien. And this was taking actions to the next step because this was the goal of the book for them to learn actions. That last video, you saw the little guy Ethan at the end. And when we started working with the iPad, we were using his finger and really supporting him using the finger to select items on the device. But he was really struggling with that. And at the end of this video, you're going to see that how when we handed him a stylus, just a very, very simple tool to access the iPad, he was able to do it independently. Look, there's Pog. Say hi. You gonna wave? Hi. I know you can wave. Say hi, Pog. There he is.
Oh, he likes
What's his name?
Pog.
Hi, Pog. All right, watch Pog. I'm going to show you what Pog can do. Pog can do lots of things. You ready? Pog likes to... Watch him.
There we go. Wait.
Watch again. Pog likes to hide. You ready? Watch.
Where did he go?
What else you can do? Pog, because I can ring the bell.
Oh, look at Pog.
What is he doing, Izzy?
It went up.
He's walking.
Mistake.
Up.
Mistake. Mistake.
You can put on the hat.
Look at me.
Pog can do all kinds of things. Look how neat.
All right. Let's see, Jordan. Let's find a good
Oh,
one. Let's find a Pog.
Robin. Robin. Stay. I'm loving.
I can.
What was I say?
Pog can
When you
hop.
get all of your smiles.
Do another one, Jordan. Good job, Jordan. I like the way you're pointing. I like the way you're using that finger.
Do you want a jelly donut? You normally don't eat them. And give him another smiley for seating because he is drinking. so good sitting and waiting.
Good job.
Thanks,
Thanks,
you, Alexis. Alexis, thank you for sharing.
Let me spell my name. Can I spell
In
mine?
just a minute, we'll let you have a turn. We're going to let you spell some words too.
Good job. You got it.
J.
What's that?
He did that one on his own.
See, he does.
But he did that on his own with this.
N.
That's good.
What do you think about that? Let's spell Jordan's
Do
name.
another one. Good. There we go. So what you can see in the video, and you can hear the teacher in the background, she says, oh my gosh, they're so engaged. They're participating. Every single student was participating. Every single student was taking a turn. Every student was actively engaged. And that's what the iPad should be. While the Alien is fun, it really added to the lesson of action verbs. And what was nice about the PUG is you saw the word before you saw the action. So it promotes literacy. And what you saw is you saw two kids there, Jordan and Ethan, and both of them, all we're working on with them is accessing the device. And what you saw from both of them is, in the beginning, one of the paraprofessionals was supporting Jordan by really doing a lot of physical support. But when we just provided the support under the elbow, as soon as he reached for that iPad, he extended his finger, was able to point. So just the motivation of engaging with the device really shifts and changes the student's behavior. And then at Ethan at the end, who wasn't able to extend his finger, as soon as we put that stylus in his hand, he extended that finger and was able to point to the device. Okay, so now let's talk about a middle school class using the 4-block literacy method. You're going to see guided reading and working with words and some writing. They are using a book called Spring Weather, which is another level A book to access reading. They've been focusing on sight words and words associated with spring weather. They've also been doing a class KWL, and you'll see a student responding to some questions related to that. So Brody is a young man with autism who we've been teaching to use the program LAMP Words for Life. Before they read the book, they kind of primed him for the language. They taught him how to navigate the device and use his device to answer questions. Now the device is being used in the literacy lesson, and the questions are being asked during the story, kind of random, to see if he's kind of generalized using his device to the guided reading lesson. So here's Brody using the app LAMP Words for Life.
Our book today is about Gracie's nose, and Gracie is a dog, so I brought this to show you guys.
What is it?
Look.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
It's a statue of a dog that's like the dogs I have.
I want to see it.
Okay.
Is that your dog?
They're my dogs. Okay.
Let me see it. Let me see it.
And here is a picture I took from above to show how long their nose is. Look at that. Can you believe that? What do you think they can do real good with that nose?
Smell.
Smell. They can smell.
Let me see. Let me see.
They can drink milk, okay? But what they do is when I let them out of the fenced part of the yard, the first thing they do is they put their nose to the ground. And they run like their vacuum cleaner, run along, and they smell things outside. And they're not necessarily that they think everything they smell is a good smell, but to them it's very interesting because it's different than where they usually are. So when I take them out in the woods at my house, they run around and smell the ground to see if they smell, and you know they go up and smell. Like one day they found, I don't want you to holler loud when I say this, but they found a dead bird in the yard. And they smelled it because to them that was interesting. Maybe they show me. Show me what animal Gracie is.
Dog.
Oh, that is so good. Excellent. Good job. So in the book. Tell me, what was the book about?
Dog.
Very good, Brody. The book was about a dog. Good. Haley?
What you can see from that video is that Brody is becoming more proficient with the device. And that first part of the video, I kind of let play where the teacher was kind of talking and interacting with the students. And what we have a tendency to do with communication devices is that our students depend on us to ask questions before they respond. And what we really want from our students is that they independently use the device. And what I love about this video is you know, Josh is asking questions about the dog, and then I really cut out the video, but Alyssa starts asking questions about the dog. And as everybody's talking about the dog, Brody's sitting there exploring his device, then goes to body parts and nose. We were talking about our nose. That is what we want from Brody. We want him generating language without being prompted with a question. His aide didn't ask him to say, what is this? He did that independently. And then he was able to answer several questions about what the story is about and tell me what do you see in the picture. So we had 3 really good examples of Brody using that device independently. And that is our goal for him. And so that is the program LAMP Words for Life. So now I'm going to show you the students interacting with the Clicker Sentence program for reading. And you'll see both Brody and Josh using it to interact with the story. What I'll tell you about Josh is that he really struggles with sight word reading. And what we did is we gave him the iPad app to use it with reading. In the very front part of the video, you're going to see Brody just looking at the device. But I want you to listen in the background, because what you're going to hear is Josh trying to read, and he's really struggling with reading. And the teacher's trying to get him to read, and it's really breaking down for him. So we gave him the clicker sentences for reading, and it gave him kind of an audio prompt to read the page fluently. And at the very end, you're going to see him reading the same pages without the audio prompt, and hear that really big difference in the quality of his reading.
Look, Lion King.
That's not what it says. The what?
Light.
No. Look at the word.
Come on, light.
Look at the word.
Don't know how to spell it.
Storm. Storm.
Storm.
Well, read it to me now.
Storm.
Read the whole sentence.
Really?
Yes.
Don't know how.
The
storm comes.
See, you did.
Your page is how you scroll through, okay?
Okay.
All right. So wait for her to tell you what page to read.
All right, TJ, let's start with you first.
Page 3.
Here goes TJ.
The fog comes.
The fog comes. Very good. Okay, Josh, let's get to page 4.
4.
Look on here so you see the page number. Find this picture. Find out what the clouds see.
It's right there. No
There you
one.
go.
And push it.
Yeah,
Listen
push
to
it.
Josh.
I can't. What else?
Period. Here at the end.
The clouds come.
The clouds come. Now you read it.
The clouds come.
Perfect.
Very good, Josh.
Good
That helped you.
job.
That's really good.
Wind comes.
The wind comes. Very good. Okay, Josh, you're going to be page 8.
Page 8. Okay. Let me find it. Here he is. I found it. Push it.
Go ahead.
The sun comes.
Good job.
How good. The
All right,
sun
read it now.
comes.
Read it.
The sun comes.
Good
Very
job,
good.
Josh.
Very good.
Spring.
Brody's going to be page 9.
Flowers.
No, I didn't tell you to go there. There.
The flowers come.
Very good, Brody. The flowers come. That's so good.
That's right. You can do it.
The spring comes. The spring comes.
Oh, that's so good, Brody. The spring comes. He finished his up. Good job. Good. Fall comes. Okay, Josh, this time you got to read page 4 without the device.
Okay. No, I
You
won't
can
look.
do it.
I won't look. I won't look. The clouds come.
Excellent,
Good
Josh. Josh, let's see if you do number 8 without it. Ready?
Okay, you ready?
Ready?
The sun comes.
Very
job.
nice.
So by the end of that lesson, you can see the confidence in Josh. He really had that kind of scaffolded support to kind of help him with reading. And then Brody doesn't have a lot of vocal speech, so having that app in front of him allows him to read a page in the book. Because our tendency is to skip over those students that can't vocally speak, and they're pointing to words, but they're not able to read it to the group. Now he has an opportunity to read a page in the book, which really just opens up the world for him. So after reading, we move to writing, because this is a text with repeatable words, and so the students can put any word in there. So they can say the rainstorm comes, the thunder comes, the lightning comes. So I very quickly set up a board for them with some scaffolded support, and each of the students were able to generate a sentence. And so you're going to kind of see me modeling for them how to create sentences using writing. The what comes? All out of order. You got to make your own sentence.
Twister. Comes.
Good job.
Hail.
Brody. I was trying to get stick.
Rainbow.
You should put a period at the end of your sentence.
The twister comes, hail, rainbow.
Twister comes, hail, and rainbow. Now let's make it a sentence. The blank comes, and put a period at the end. See if you can find the word the. Good.
The.
What do you want to say comes?
They may mean it.
Okay, take your time.
Hail.
And end with comes.
Where's one top? There you go.
Comes.
And then the period.
The
Good
hail
job.
comes.
Now, you make one more sentence. Do it on your own. Do 2 words.
Yeah, we'll get the keyboard.
Oh, my.
That's okay. Yeah, someone else typed that. All right, do another sentence for me.
You need to put a game on there, Sturdy?
Okay, we can erase it. Just go ahead. The X to go backwards. Now we'll take it out. Good. Now you do and. You remember how to get the keyboard? Get the keyboard right in there.
That's right.
Type and.
Jump thing down.
Is and up on your word wall? I think it's one of the words we need to put up on your word wall. Because that's an important word for writing. The hail and space.
And.
All right, go back to the keyboard again. Oops. Yep,
Close
down.
it out. Good job.
Hail and what else?
Derecho.
Good. Derecho.
It's a high wind that comes really fast and knocks things down.
Like
Comes.
the paralyzed.
Comes.
It could.
The hail and derecho comes.
Good job. The, any one of these words, comes, period.
Okay.
All right?
Rainbow.
Good job.
The rainbow.
I'm gonna erase the period because we're gonna say the rainbow comes.
Oh.
So it's okay. Now do rainbow again.
Rainbow.
Where's comes? Good job.
Comes.
Make sure you put the period at the end.
Period.
The rainbow comes.
Good job. All right, now I want you to do 2 words. You ready? This is the hard one, but I know you can do this, Josh. You ready?
Uh-huh.
All right. Start with the.
The.
Okay. Take one of your words.
Derecho.
Okay. Now we're gonna do the word and. Press the keyboard. And is spelled A.
A. What's A?
And N.
And. What's it?
And D.
D was D.
You look real carefully. Where's D? Good job. Yep. I'm going to close the keyboard, hit the green, and now pick another
Twister.
one. Okay, and then adds comes.
Comes.
Period.
The derecho and twister comes.
Good job. You made a sentence. Okay, so you can see the students using the writing program, and you see me providing scaffolded supports. I don't disappear when they're learning how to write it. I model it, I show it to them. That is really cut down, but I was demonstrating before they were actually using the device how to write, how to type in the word and then providing them that scaffolded support. These are students that would typically just write what's provided for them, or they would write one word, or the teacher would ask them for the word and they would write it down for them. Now they can independently write. The nice thing about the clicker sentences is I can email this document to myself and print it out. So the students will have access to their writing, not just producing it on the iPad. The last thing I want to show you from this classroom is a working with words activity. With the guided 4-block, we move from guided reading into writing and then using the sight words and words to look at word families. And Josh is working on some simple word families using the word og. And prior to this activity, the teacher was using a sheet of words and the students were writing them down on magnetic boards. And Josh can copy them, but he's really not producing the words. He's not playing with the sounds and you know, putting words and letters in order, really seeing that og is the same whether it's fog, log, or hog. And what you'll see is me working with him, and it's about a 3-minute video where we go from him really struggling with producing words to the very end actually producing the words on his own. Let's do this. You ready?
You know what?
I'm going to give you all the letters.
Right. Good.
Okay? Put them all over here. And I want you to make those 3 letters into a word that says fog. Which one goes first? F. All right, you ready? I'm going to show you. F-O-G says fog. Fog. All right, I want you to do it again, okay? Spell the word fog.
job.
What does that say?
Fog.
Good job. I'm going to do another one, okay? Erase those. Log.
Log.
Let's see if you can do it on your own, and then I'll help you if you get it. All right. You ready? I'm going to show you. Log. O. Starts with L-O-G. What does that say?
Log.
Good.
Okay.
All right.
I know
Your
how
turn.
to do it now.
All right.
Boink, boink, boink.
Good. Let's read it.
Log.
Good.
L-O-G.
And to read it says?
Log.
Good job. You want to do one more?
Yeah.
Hog. What is a hog?
Animal.
What kind of animal?
It likes to eat.
Does it look like a dog or a pig?
Pig.
Yeah, it is like a pig. All right, ready? Hog. All right, remember what log and fog look like.
Okay.
Okay, see if you can do this one on your own. Really think hard. Hog. All right, you got the O in the right place this time. All right, watch me. Hog.
Hog.
H-O-G. Hog. All right. Your turn. Make the word hog.
Boom. Boom.
H.
H-O. Hog.
G.
G. Hog.
Hog. Good job. I like the way you're spelling. It says og. Got L, F, and H. You decide which one goes in the front. You ready? Log.
Ta-da.
Ta-da! That is
perfect.
awesome. You ready?
Yeah.
All right. Hog.
Bam.
Good
Way to
job.
go.
I like that. All right. You ready?
Yeah.
Fog. Good work. You're good. I messed you up, didn't I? What'd you get?
Fog.
Good job. High five. Oh, I like the way you worked. Okay, look at me, Miss Sturgill. I am writing words.
We started looking my
I'm
words.
so proud. So was Josh engaged? Was he motivated? It was lunchtime, and he stayed with me to work. The lunch was delayed. He really worked with me and was working really, really well on words. And this is a child who does not easily recognize his letters. But by the end, that repeated exposure to working with words, moving letters around, and producing text really got him to the point of reading those words independently, which is what we want. But the thing about the iPads is it's an instructional tool. It looks no different than anything else we're doing in the classrooms. I engage with him as a teacher using an iPad. I didn't leave him to just produce words and let him do it on his own. I guided him through and scaffolded support so that he can independently write and produce text. And the last app that I want to show you is actually from a different classroom, and this is where I'm going to wrap up. One of the things that we do for students with autism is we use our iPads and our iTechnology to provide supports for kind of managing their behavior. And a teacher shared these videos with me from the same school system, and she's using this app called Story Road, which is a digital storytelling app to create kind of social narratives for a student with autism in kindergarten. And he, was struggling with some social skills, and so they created a kind of a little social story of him interacting with a peer. And I want to show you that.
Rachel is my friend. When you see Rachel, I say hello. I see Aiden, I say hello. Smile. Look at the person. Use a friendly voice. Say hi. Hi, Aiden. Hi, Rachel.
A very simple way to use your iPad to really just create a very, very quick 30-second kind of social narrative for students. The nice thing about the Story Road app is I can email that video to me, and it comes like a video. So what you saw there was you saw my finger interacting with the iPad, so you can see what it looks like on the iPad. But what you need to know is that you can actually email video, and here's another video of Aiden doing a school job.
Welcome to Powell Valley Primary. This is our office. Lisa and Kelly work in the office. This is the space that Lisa and Kelly fixed for Aiden to shred papers. This is the shredder Aiden uses in the office to shred his paper. Mrs. Dickinson also uses the copy room. When Aiden shreds paper, he uses only his paper, not another teacher's. Mrs. Dickinson loves Aiden. She wants Aiden to shred paper with her. Just don't shred Miss Dickinson's paper. Aiden shreds paper in the office. It is his job. You do a good job, Aiden.
I love shredding paper. It's my job.
So you can see what it looks like when you actually email it. Just a short video that you can show on any device and show on a computer. So to kind of wrap up my presentation, what I want to tell you is I've just shown you about 5 or 6 apps, and there are thousands of apps out there that really can be used in a classroom. But what I really wanted to show you is it's about active planning and about instruction. It's not just giving a student an iPad, but really planning it and using it for instruction, and really embedding it very naturally into what you're doing in the classroom. But if you're really looking for a number of apps out there to really kind of see what's out there and what is usable, there's a number of websites, and I've given you 4 of them. The first one is autismat.com, which is my website where I really kind of keep it up to date as far as apps that I find are really helpful and useful for students with autism. There's iautism.com, there's autisable.com, and then autismspeaks.com. So I want to thank you for this presentation, and go have fun with iPads.